Nigeria's Finance Minister Wale Edun unveiled the Accelerated Stabilisation and Advancement Plan (ASAP) to tackle challenges hindering economic reforms and to support sectoral growth. ASAP aligns with President Tinubu's 8 economic priorities and includes subcommittee plans for agriculture, energy, including oil, gas and power, health, social welfare and business support. Among other things, the plan proposes using an executive order to approve temporary paddy rice imports for millers. Additionally, the government will consider importing maize and rice seeds to boost domestic production of these staple crops. I'm now joined by Sam Chidoka, CEO, Kairos Capital, for more on this. Thank you, Sam, for joining me today.
Thank you. Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right. Well, talking about the ASAP, which is the Accelerated Stabilization and Advancement Plan, it is designed to address key challenges affecting the reform initiatives and also to stimulate development in various sectors of the economy. I just want to ask you, is this the much needed consolidation we have always hoped to see from the fiscal authority?
Oh, well, so I think it's a case of maybe better late than never. Maybe that's the case we have. So if you go back a bit, the elections that brought in the current government happened in February or March 2023. Results were declared in March 2023. Then you had April and May, and then you had handover May 29. And then 1 year after, we're now talking about a stabilization plan. I would say that this is over a year late. However, maybe better late than never. What we have today is a plan that is still a draft that has been given to the president. The president hasn't signed it up yet. The plan talks about 8 different sectors. So you can say maybe it's an 8-point agenda. I'm not a fan of many point agendas from governments. The last time we had a 7-point agenda from the government, I'm not sure the 7 points were met conclusively. I would always say, why not focus? Because people have to understand that government is a continuum. I would expect a situation where you have a long-term, short-term, and an immediate plan. On your immediate plan, I'm not sure you should have 8-point agenda because that's quite a bit unwieldy. Because you remember, you as a government, you have 4 years tenure, and so you need to tick certain boxes. So we've seen a draft. Maybe by the time we get the full document, the signed document, there will be an opportunity to review and see what the plans will be for the economy.
Well, looking at prevailing macroeconomic conditions, I mean, you talked about not being a fan of, 8-point agenda and all of that. But looking at the current macroeconomic conditions, which of these do you think you would have preferred that the government focuses on?
So I would say that government, I would have expected, if my opinion was sought, I would have expected that we narrow on the major issues that affect. See, if you look at where we are as a nation today, insecurity is a major destabilizing element in this nation today. It's because of insecurity that we have pipeline vandalization, and so we cannot meet our OPEC quota, and we cannot export enough crude and get enough foreign currency for the central bank to ensure that we can meet demand, and we have pent-up demand in the market. Is because of vandalization. We're doing 1.3 to 1.4 million barrels per day. We ought to be doing 1.7, but those channels are constantly vandalized because of insecurity. Today, food inflation is at 40%. One of the reasons why food inflation is at 40% is also insecurity. People can't go to their farms. Those who go to their farms literally have to pay to harvest products. People have to pay militia to protect them just so that they can farm. Insecurity is a major issue. I was watching an interview of somebody who said he had to move his business from the southeast to Lagos just because of insecurity in the parts of the southeast. So you see all of that affecting productivity and affecting GDP. So I would have said main point number 1 is insecurity. So you tackle that. The next thing you want to deal with is agriculture. And please, when we talk about agriculture, I'm not talking about subsistence farming. We're talking about mechanized and amplified farming, using the right tools, using the right techniques, using the right fertilizer, cultivating in the right manner so that you can produce enough goods and services in the agriculture space that we can even start exporting. So I would say agriculture. If you focus on insecurity, focus on agriculture as a government, the multiplier effect on that on the economy will be much more than we have that we'll probably see going forward.
All right. I mean, I'm tempted not to ask you this question, but I will ask you anyway. We've seen the ASAP, we've seen the two reports. I mean, one was submitted on Tuesday, another was submitted on Wednesday. So looking at all of that, which of those things sort of stand out for you? Which one stood out for you, rather?
Well, so again, I think that looking at I've not had the privilege to read the entire report, right? And I also note that it's still a draft report, it's not in final terms. But I think that the plan to stimulate activity by suspending some import duties, waive some import duties, and to go back to importing paddy rice, I think that's a step in the right direction. Because again, for the things that we import, right, when the cost of importation is so high, already you have a situation where we had no choice but to devalue the currency, and the currency has also depreciated on its own. Now you're already importing things at a higher rate than we were doing before. When the cost of clearing those goods also affects the final price, then you have no option but to be driving up inflation. So regardless of how much the monetary policy operators are trying to increase rates so that they can mop up money in circulation, it's not going to affect inflation materially because you have imported inflation. But once we begin to reduce the cost of importation for the imported goods, and I dare say, for an economy that is not producing enough, in the short term and in the mid-term, there's nothing wrong with importing. However, on a sustainable model and in the long term, we must have plans to begin to do substitution in such a way that over time, we will reduce importation and produce more of what. But obviously, if you look at world economies, whether you look at the British economy or you look at the US economy, these guys still import quite a bit, regardless of how productive the economy is. So I think that if you can walk and chew gum at the same time, we can import, we can also produce.
Well, talking about that, I think I'll just spell out some of the things we have there. There is the recommendation for suspension of import duty and VAT. There is also importation of paddy rice, which you talked about. And there is also a recommendation to onboard 2 million farmers across value chains successfully to enhance productivity and sustainability. That's something you've also talked about. But I would like you to just speak to this. Do you see any challenge in the implementation of these recommendations that we're seeing now?
I agree with suspension of tariffs and import duties and VAT on certain goods to help to drive down inflation. It makes sense at this point because we don't have too much room to wiggle. But when it comes to agriculture, right, as long as we continue to treat agriculture as subsistence agriculture or talking about farmers in isolation and all of that, I'm not sure that we are going to get the desired result. My view about agriculture is that it must be mechanized agriculture. It must be large-scale agriculture. We have to find a way to bring farmers together and help them to mechanize their processes. Whether the government will have to maybe use the government balance sheet and provide some guarantees so that original equipment producers can produce some of the tractors and equipment needed and give it to our farmers so that they can use, maybe that's the way to go. But I insist that when it comes to farming, it has to be large scale, it has to be mechanized, and you have to deal with the insecurity that has affected farmers. We cannot be talking about agriculture in Nigeria and we still have herders, cattle herders, and farmers' challenges across the nation. You cannot plant and then people just allow their animals to walk through somebody's farm and destroy all that they have, and we think that we are going to get that done. On the second bit about farming is that it is one thing to produce the crops, but it's another thing to move them from the farm gate to the market gate. Then you need storage. So we have to invest in storage because a lot of things that we even produce when we're not producing enough are destroyed just by passage of time because of lack of storage. So government needs to also invest in that value chain. Then you need to have good roads. Then you need to make sure that when farm products are moved on Nigerian roads, that we don't create unnecessary tolls. You meet somewhere, you have to pay for local government. In another state, you pay for state government, multiple taxation. A truck that is coming from the north to the west, before it gets here, will have spent thousands on the road, settling all kinds of multiple taxation. You cannot be productive if that's what we're doing.
Right.
We need to solve these niggling issues as quickly as possible.
Okay, I know we've talked about this and we sort of agreed it was only semantics, but I feel it's good to see the federal government sort of come clean on this. How do you explain that expenditure on fuel subsidy is projected to reach 5.4 trillion naira by the end of 2024, compared to 3.6 trillion naira in 2023 and 2 trillion naira in 2022? I mean, coming from a government that has told us that, they are only paying recovery or what have you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, good. It is clear to the discerning that we've been paying fuel subsidy, and it is clear that we've been doing that for a while. Again, if by the time you check the pump price at the pump and the landing price of refined products at the port, you know that somebody is subsidizing. Whether you call it under recovery or you call it subsidy, at the end of the day, somebody is paying for it. So it's been clear to market watchers like us that we've been paying subsidy. If you remove the subsidy entirely, the fuel price as we have it today will be over 1,000 naira at the pump. But I think what government did was to look at the politics of it, because what it means is that if you do that, then it's going to affect households and individuals a lot. And there is the politics of it, and we cannot take that away. And so it is clear that now we have a formal clarification that we are still paying subsidies. Subsidies in themselves are not bad, but the question is, what are you subsidizing? Personally, I'm against subsidy on fuel. I think we should subsidize healthcare. I think we should subsidize education. But when it comes to fuel and things, energy, I think people should be made to pay the right market price. But you get an offtake when you go to the hospital and you can get subsidized treatment.
Sam, let me come in here. For some persons, their concern is really the amount we're talking about now. We're talking about 5.4 trillion in 2024. I mean, that's the mathematics some persons want to understand. That's one. And then some Nigerians would also need clarification here. I mean, we were told in June that the government was earning more due to fuel subsidy removal and, currency float. And so an infrastructure support fund was sort of set up. And we're told the excess money was put there. Now, what has been the trend with FAC since June 2023? We knew there was a time we had 1.9 trillion naira, and then they had to put 1 trillion in the support fund, and then the other was shared amongst the tiers of government. I mean, what has been the trend since June 2023, and what is the current situation with the ISF, that's Infrastructure Support Fund?
So you've got to look at what we've done. Two things accounted for the increase in FAC. First one is the devaluation and depreciation of the currency. So when we get $100, if you exchange it at 500 naira or at 700 naira or at 1,004, it tells you how much the states and federal government will share. So that's one of the major issues why we're getting more naira, is because of the devaluation and depreciation of the currency. The second issue why we got more from FAC is because a part of the subsidy was removed. So when you hear that we spent 2-point-something trillion last year, it could have been double or 3 times that if some part of subsidy was not removed. The only thing I'd say here is that entire subsidy was not removed. It was partial removal of subsidy. So that's what led to the upswing in the amount shared by FAC. And that's why you could also get some money to put in the infrastructure sinking fund, because there was partial subsidy removal and there was devaluation of the currency and also depreciation of the currencies. Those are the facts on ground. Are we still paying subsidy? Yes. Will that subsidy increase? Yes, it will. In as much as the price of crude goes up, the price of subsidy will increase. So it's a double-edged sword for Nigeria. We get more money when the price of crude goes up, but we spend more money because we're not refining locally. And because of the theft happening with our locally produced crude, We don't have enough to even supply Dangote refinery. Dangote refinery has to import crude at the moment. Part of the reason we don't have enough. Why? It's been stolen. Why it's being stolen? Insecurity. And that's why I say at the top of the watch list of this government ought to be dealing with insecurity across the nation.
All right, let's close on this very quickly. Now, talking about the Business Support Subcommittee plan, the team sort of seeks to ameliorate the challenges faced in the area of forex volatility and, raw materials. And so they're looking at a 1 trillion naira stabilization fund for light and heavy manufacturing to sort of ease asset utilization gaps and, inventory refinancing, beg your pardon. What's your thoughts on this in less than 2 minutes so we can close?
So it sounds very good when we say things like that. And I'm always, I'm not a fan of sharing money, as it were. Rather, we should find a way of making sure that we provide infrastructure that everybody benefits from and not just a cluster of the market. Look at our conditional cash transfer and look at the mess that we've made of it. So look at the loans that CBN gave to the farmers and look at the mess that we've made of it. So when you introduce another one, it first comes to me, I'm skeptical about it because, again, the Nigerianness of how we do things. But benefit of doubt, we'll watch and see how this plays out. When people take loans in this country, especially when it comes from government, most people assume that it's not a loan, it's a grant. Hopefully, people will understand that this is a loan and that they have to pay back at some point, and it can help to stimulate the economy. We'll watch and see.
Right. Thank you so much, Sam Chidoka, CEO, Kairos Capital. Thank you for your thoughts on the show today.